This is Chris with Forte's Classic Garage. We're gonna do a valve adjustment on a hydraulic roller setup. It's a Ford 351 Windsor in a 78 F-150. Pretty sweet truck. She's pretty sweet. But so a couple things just before you get started. Fuel pump. You might want to make sure if it's a mechanical fuel pump that you have it blocked off in some way, so you can unplug the line going into the fuel pump coming from the tank to keep fuel from flowing the whole time that you're using the bump starter and turning the motor over. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is you gotta pull your valve covers off, obviously. Duh. All right, and then most setups will require a 5/8 wrench and an Allen, and so 5/8 wrench and an Allen. The book is going to tell you to do it a certain way. I'm just going to show you our way. It's really the same concept, but it's just kind of a shorter way to do it, a quicker way to do it. You can do a whole side at a time, whereas the book I think has you going all back and forth while you're moving the motor over. So you need an Allen in this case for the center locking piece, and then a 5/8 wrench for the adjusting nut. And you're gonna need a bump starter, or you're gonna have to turn it over by hand manually. So that might be an option for people who have it out. But there's a couple critical things to watch for when you're doing this. But one is that the tip of that roller, if you're freshly installing a roller setup, that tip of that roller has to travel over the center of the valve stem, back and forth. If it's too far forward or too far back as it's traveling, which is it has to do with the push rod length. So you got to make sure your push rod lengths are correct when you're doing this. There's a lot of critical things you don't just want to buy. There's no such thing as bolt-on. That's a load of crap. That's just some made-up crap. So you gotta actually do your homework and make sure everything is functioning right. Don't just buy something out of the box and then bolt it on because the parts guy said so. So and make sure that roller tip is correct as far as rolling over the center of that valve. Otherwise you're gonna destroy your valves. You're gonna destroy your valve guides very quickly, and your motor will be smoking after not too many miles. So all right, those are some quick things to know. Now the sequence of how you adjust it. You're gonna bump it around till the exhaust port starts to open. By open I mean this starts to push the valve open, so down. And then once that valve starts to push, once this fulcrum starts to rock and push down on this valve, then you're going to adjust this valve because it puts the cam at the right position to adjust the intake valve. So you need to figure out, you need to be very sure of which one is intake and which one is exhaust, because if you do this wrong, you could actually cause some damage to your motor. So that already started to move, but I can't really trust it, so I'm going to go around another time to make sure that it wasn't already in sequence. And the truck is in gear, so that's not good. Another thing to remember, folks, make sure that your truck is out of gear when you do it. Safety first. Alright, we're in neutral now. So, yeah, you gotta make sure she's out of gear, otherwise she'll start creeping forward, especially if it's a stick shift. If it's an automatic, just make sure it's in park. Okay, it just began to move. It just started to rock. So the exhaust is starting to open. So we're gonna adjust the intake. And the way you adjust it, never break loose the one or the other independently of each other. You could strip them out, cause damage. So you hold the one while you break loose the lock. And then I would back off the lock quite a few turns so you're not coming tight on it when you're trying to adjust it. So now you're gonna loosen this up until you have quite a bit of play. And the important part is that you don't tighten this up and push that push rod. Push the push rod into the lifter and pump down the lifter and squish that spring in there, because then you're not adjusting it properly. You need to get it to where the easiest way is with the intake off, but most of the time you're not going to take the intake and carburetor off to adjust valves, so you got to learn to do it this way. So you got tons of play, tons of lash. It's called valve lash. And now you're just going to slowly bring this down so you have zero lash, but you're not compressing this, because you can, if you turn this, I would do this by hand, because if you turn this with a wrench, you could actually start pushing this push rod into the lifter and pump down that lifter, and you're going to have a way too tight valve. You're going to be doing it wrong, and you can cause some damage. So now we don't have any play right here. This is the play that I'm talking about. It's the tip of the rocker to the tip of the valve stem. So you're going to bring this down, and it'll feel really loose, and then all of a sudden it'll get just a little tight, and that's zero valve lash. And now you're gonna go either 3/4 or 1 full turn after you get to zero lash. So I do it in quarters. There's 1/4, 2 quarters, there's a half, 3/4. You can do 3/4, or you can do 1. I always do 1. And there's 1 full turn. And now you're gonna hold this in place as you bring down your center lock. And snug it up. All right, so we've now successfully adjusted the intake valve on the passenger side of this motor. So now now we're gonna bump it around. So it's not the same on both sides. When you're adjusting the intake valve, you wait till the exhaust begins to open. When you're adjusting the exhaust valve, you have to wait till the intake begins to close. So it's gonna go all the way down and then just start to come back up, and that's when you adjust the exhaust. Okay, so now the valve's going down, and you want to bump it very slowly. It's opening, so right now the valve is open. Now it's fully compressed and open. That's another thing you want to check for if you're buying all new stuff, is that the spring is not compressing all the way down on itself. That'll break some valve springs real quick. All critical things to watch. Okay, now it went all the way down and it just began to come back up. It's just starting to close. So now we're gonna adjust the exhaust. All right, here we go. Alright, so back the lock off, and now we break the valve loose, and then it should be easy to turn by hand. If it's not, you might have a problem. Okay, so we got tons of valve lash there, and now we're going to slowly bring it down, checking the lash as we go. Yep, right there. So we got 0 lash. Now we're gonna go, same thing. You're gonna go 1 full turn, and I usually go in quarters because you have limited space to work with. So there's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and 4. So we got 1 full turn past 0 lash. And now we're gonna bring her tight. Bring that lock tight. And we have 1 cylinder's valves adjusted. Don't over tighten, because you can strip, you know how it is. You can strip out an Allen by over tightening an Allen. All right, that is how you're gonna do the whole motor. So remember, intake starts to go down and just begins to come back up. That's when you adjust the exhaust valve. And this is all on the same cylinder. Okay, so you're not gonna adjust some other exhaust valve. It's per cylinder. So when this intake valve starts to go down, comes back up, begins to come back up, you adjust the exhaust. When the exhaust valve begins to open, just begins to go down, then you're adjusting the intake. So there it is. Now you know. Now you don't need me. So it's Chris with Forte's Classic Garage. Thanks for watching. All right.